When we talk about longevity, the word itself means long life. We're into a whole new phase of our society. I have included in your little packet here an article I wrote on the ancient concepts of longevity. This one's for you. We saved it. It's the last one. And historical perspectives on the role of the elderly that I published some years ago. And in it you will see that some of the tensions that grow out of living long are reflected there. Today, as I say, we're into a new phase of our understanding of growing old. A child born, I think most of you know this, at the turn of the century, had about 47 years to live, according to estimates. Of course, a lot of them lived longer. A lot of them didn't. This is because of childhood diseases that have now been pretty well taken care of, but also because of the changes in diet, exercise, and a lot of other things too. We're now at a place where a child born today can expect to live into the mid-70s. That's a 25-year plus expectancy that was not there in 1900. However, a person who reached 65 years of age in 1900 had an expectation of 12 years beyond that, which would be about 77. One who reaches 65 in 1993 has 15 years expectancy. So we haven't made that much change once you reach the point of old age or retirement or 65 and up. But something else has happened, and that is the number of people who are living longer than ever before. In 1900, the 65 plus age group constituted 4.1% of our population. Today, it's 11.5%. And more than 1,000 people every day in America enter into the ranks of 65 and over. And that's a lot of people. By the year 2000, we estimate the number of over 65s will be 20%, providing, of course, that I can get some of my friends to stop inhaling tobacco and decrease their alcohol consumption, improve their diet, watch their health patterns, and that sort of thing. But, and of course, we have to stop polluting air, water, and soil. A few things that do interfere with long life. The number of people over 75 years of age will have increased by perhaps, well, we figure by the year 2000, they will be 20% of the population. And the number of centenarians, over 100 in the United States, was 3,000 in 1969, 10,000 in 1979. By the year 2000, will be over 100,000 people over 100 years of age. Now, these are nice demographic figures, statistics, projections, and they do have their impact. Right now, we are engaged in a desperate search for longevity. What is it that may give me those extra years? And there are two approaches to this. One is the kind of thing that says, perhaps we can work on factors that will keep the diseases of aging at a minimum. So you have a chart like this, where you have, this would be the age down here, and you have, starting off with 100% chance of long life, and what they're hoping by that is to defeat it. Then you get to the point where your heart and your body give out, and you die. What they're doing is saying, if we can beat Alzheimer's, if we can beat some of the cardiovascular problems, if we can beat Huntington's disease, all these kind of things that hit us, we can have pretty well a healthy life all the way through here till we die. That's one approach. There's another approach, and this is the one that's very strongly endorsed over at the Andrus Center, and that's the elongation of life itself. So we start off here at infancy with a 100% chance of long life, and we go through the teenagers where we lose a whole bunch of them by drive-by shootings and all the nice things that go on around here. And then we get down to middle age where we kind of go down kind of a platform like this. And then we get down, I should have put an end on this way. We get down here towards old age, and what we ordinarily we'd have met here, what they want to do is extend this out here. So we live longer and longer and longer. And as a result of that, there has been this fantastic effort to find secrets that will cause us to live longer. Now, in the chart that I've given you on the second page, you'll see that there are, first of all, the modern fiction about the very old. And what I'm referring to here is some material that appeared in the press, in studies a number of years ago, that looked at groups of people that appeared to be long-lived. What is it that gives these people their tremendous length of life? And one of the villages in Vilcabamba in the Ecuadorian Andes, the Hunzas of Kashmir and the Adkins in the Soviet Union were all hailed as humans who had not only become centenarians, 100 years plus, without the loss of vigor, but some were supposed to have reached ages as high as 150 years of age. Now, as we do the research in this, doubts have been cast on this, and there's no doubt that a large number of older people live in these communities, but they haven't reached the lifespans that were once claimed for them. One of the things they did find was that the vigorous older people no longer were not, as we were, reliant on high technologies, mechanized patterns of travel. They walked. They worked with their hands in the fields. They kept physically fit. They engaged in activities that contributed to their physical fitness. How's that? And their diet, not like the refined, super refined products we get in the grocery stores, or we can throw in the microwave oven and take out and eat. They ate unrefined products that included vegetables and grains, and this also appears to have contributed to what their vigor and their longevity. And they also appeared to have been sexually active, which is a desire for many of us as we grow old, and their social environment provided psychological support. So there are a whole lot of things working in their favor here. And I suppose, too, when we come right down to it, there's a genetic heritage that we need to look at, too. But the claims to excessively long life no longer hold. But if you look at the listing I've given you here, there are modern efforts designed to beat the aging process. I have a film that I could have brought here, but it would have taken a complete hour to show. But it begins with people taking the waters at Baden-Baden. This is a 2,000-year-old spa, as I've indicated here. And what happens is they go in, they relax, there's massage, there's classical music, there are good foods, and so on, all designed to relax the person, make life easy. And that fits into this idea here, that you contribute to longevity by removing the tensions that somehow put strain on our heart and our body and so on. Then, of course, the next one I've listed here is the cosmetic industry. They will make you look younger. You know, you get the magic thing that you rub around your eyes and the wrinkles disappear, and on and on and on. You know, you've seen these. You put Grecian formula on your hair and immediately you're back to where you were 30 years ago. We have, Retina A is the other one. That's the one I was trying to remember. We have all these materials that are being sold over the counter as people desperately try to fight the signs of aging. If I can remove this, I will look younger. And of course, we are in a youth-oriented culture. And the advertisers have picked up on this, and they've made you say, if I have a wrinkle there, I better do something about it because I won't be appreciated the way I should be, and so on. The next one I've listed is vitamins and medication. I don't know if you know of Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shore. They wrote a book called Life Extension. a number of years ago that, as I've indicated, sold 2 million copies, which is a nice way to retire as a millionaire by having books that sell in that quantity. None of mine that you mentioned ever do. For 10 months, it was the bestseller list. And if you looked in on their home, their walls are lined with bottles of pills and with liquids and so on, that they're doing this all day long in an attempt, again, to beat the factor of the aging process. They argue that the aging results from mechanisms, and if we know how to slow down or even reverse the actions and the processes of aging, then we will live on, and they even say forever, which is kind of scary for me, unless some accident or disease or murder or suicide should get you. In one of my classes, I keep warning the students that by the insurance company's profile, I should go first. But there's always that 18-wheeler out there that turns the corner when you're not expecting, and they could go first. So death is always at our elbow. I hate to say that to them, but it's true. Then I've listed the Pritikin Longevity Center in Santa Monica. There you can go and pay $3,500 per week. You can exercise, they call you up for exercise, and you exist on a third world diet of vegetables and beans and so on at $3,500 a week. It's a nice room, but what they have done is they've looked at the Indian tribes of South America where heart disease and obesity are virtually unknown. And so you see these well-to-do people from the well-to-do parts of our city sweating it out on one of these things that my doctor uses for stress tests, and going down and eating vegetables and beans for lunch, and apparently saying they enjoy it. Then there's the escape pattern of fighting aging. And you can escape to Sun City in Arizona, where 46,000 men and women over age 55 live in what is called active retirement. Active retirement means that they, in this isolated community, if some of you young people drove in, they would have the 65 and over policemen following you immediately because they'd know you didn't belong. Everybody in the community is older. But active, there are swimming pools, there are bowling alleys, there are dancing classes, there are craft classes, there are study courses. They even have their own cheerleading team of elderly ladies who are properly blonded hair and all the rest of it, and come out and they do handstands and all the rest of the things with pom-poms that our football teams are used to seeing with some of the younger women. And they have become internationally famous, and they seem to be having a lot of fun. In their old age, that is, they are relaxing, they're enjoying themselves, they're setting their own pace, they're doing their own thing, and hoping that this will contribute to longevity. Then, of course, there's the business of plastic surgery. You can always get something that will pick up this sagging flesh. Have you ever seen how this is done? How they reach in under your skin here and pull everything back up? It is a pretty gruesome looking operation, but you end up with a different face. You look in the mirror and you're not quite sure who you are anymore. You have your nose done and everything else, your eyes at the same time. Pardon? Phyllis Diller, but Phyllis Diller has something else going for her, that she will always be Phyllis Diller. But I've seen cases where the person looks in and is almost startled that this new person is looking back at them. Hypothermia, that is the idea, if you lower the body temperature, they have found this in certain life forms, that if you lower the body temperature and you control the diet, some extension of life was possible. Most of us like to be warm, so that hasn't really caught on as the greatest thing ever. And then you'll see I've got cryonics. Do you know what cryonics is? This is the people that freeze you, yes. They have they use liquid nitrogen. They get a newly dead person soon after as they properly can. They group out here called Alcor out in Riverside, And they will freeze the body. They will insert their own liquids into the veins. They will charge $120,000 for a body, or if you prefer, you can have your head done. And they will clone a body for you in the future, they hope, when you will be, whatever has killed you will be no longer something that science can't cure. They will bring you back together, and you will be a new person, a new body, any kind of a body you want. And so their language includes things like living forever. Right now there's some 40 people out there in deep freeze, including some very famous personalities. And according, pardon?
On Riverside Drive.
In Riverside, California. Yes. And the students in my class have named the product Corpsicles, which then I must tell you about an organization called Flame. These people call themselves immortalists, and they believe that they are physically immortal now. That is, they deny aging, they deny death, and they're going to live forever. And they have people come in from all over the world, they cheer each other on, and then go back to their various countries, probably to die, but nevertheless, you don't talk about that. Then in Arkansas, there is a multi-million-dollar government restrictive diet program on aging rats. And they have found that rats live to the equivalent of 150 years of age. So the question is whether or not the restrictive diet that enables rats to live to 150 years, equivalent of 150 years of human life, can be transferred to humans. It's interesting that the research faculty, or facility that they're using is a 7-story underground structure that was built for military purposes, for the production of poison gases and military use of biological warfare and so on. And right now it's the largest research faculty in the world, or facility in the world, geared to the study of aging. So, 150 years, we're getting there. Then we have Dr. Roy Walford over here at UCLA, who has found that by reducing the calorie intake of rodents and primates, some primates, he could extend life to approximately 120 years. And by the way, 120 is getting into the language now as an approximation of how long we can live. That prescription calls for 1,500 calories per day. Then let's see, the next one is the HGH. This is by Dr. Rudman of the Medical College of Wisconsin, and HGH is a human growth hormone. That's what it stands for. And he made the body of 23 elderly men more youthful. Actually, he claims he has reversed some of the aspects of the aging process. The lean body tissue increased 9%, and the fat tissues decreased 14%. And this is a reverse of what actually happens in the aging process. The costs of this little process are $14,000 per year. The long-term effects are not known, although they think it might cause some abnormal bone growth and so on. Then there's another study. You've seen these pictures, I'm sure, on television of prematurely aged children. You know, a child 8 or 9 years of age that looks like he's 65 or 70, and with all the infirmities that come with older age. And they begin to age immediately after birth. And the search now is for what is called the errant gene that causes this process. And the hope is, if we can discover the gene that causes this, perhaps then we can learn how to retard aging, and rather than the gene which caused it to speed up, the process to speed up. Then the last one, well, not almost the last one, is Dr. West of Dallas. He is backed by a number of Texas multimillionaires. He's engaged in genetic research. He is talking about a lifespan of 100,000 years, or perhaps 200 or 300,000 years. And all I can say is, if you have 100,000 years, think of the number of classes you could attend, think of all the degrees you could have behind your name, and think of the crowding on the face of the earth. When you talk to the people who are supporting him, and they're really intent on this, they say distribution of foods and so on, this is a matter of business. We could handle that. I'm not so sure. When I talk to some of my colleagues in the Andrus Center who are engaged in aging research, I won't tell you what they call this process. It isn't very polite, but they have not much faith in Dr. West of Dallas. And then last of all, I must mention chromium picolinate, which you can buy at Trader Joe's stores. They're scattered throughout the area here. And the product is processed by a company called Trader Darwin's. And the motto on the bottle is the survival of the fittest. And what has happened is that Gary Evans at Bemidji State University in Minnesota found that a dietary supplements of chromium picolinate extended the life of rats by 1/3. And he suggests that it might be possible to utilize this for humans also. So these are some of the desperate efforts people are trying to do to put on these extra few years here. What is missing in all this is any emphasis on the quality of life, which is the concern here. I don't know whether you know the Homeric hymn that tells about the goddess Eos, the goddess of the dawn, who fell in love with a human and went to the gods and begged them to allow the person to have immortality. And the gods finally granted her request. And so Timotheus, who was a Trojan, by the way, was granted this extended life. She forgot to ask for eternal youth to go with it. And so what happened is he continued to age and age and age until he was confined in a dark room as a babbling idiot, absolutely incompetent, and so on. So that when we talk about aging, to age without quality, to have quantity without quality, is something that we need to wrestle with a bit and think about. One of the questions is, what about this information? First of all, a lot of it is a desperate attempt. It's this attempt to extend life a few years. And there are people who have reached 100, 105, 110, who are very active, doing things, amazing people. There are also people who have reached not near that length of life, who are absolutely miserable. And all you need to do is go to some of the nursing homes and some of these places where they have been isolated from the public because they can no longer be cared for, and wonder, what is the quality of life? This brings us into a whole series of things that I'm going to touch on in a few minutes. I'm very interested in what's taking place. I'm not excited because I don't think they're going to change my lifespan that much. I think I've gone beyond the pale, but some of the younger people might be affected. And then we move into a whole series of ethical problems that we'll take a look at in a moment. Yes, sir?
How about your desire to improve the quality and quantity of your life?
I'm very much into this scheme. I would like to go on until I've worn out the body parts and then I go in the dump heap. Somebody said it's better to burn out than to rust out. And this to me can be rusting out. This to me is going along, and if they can control the kinds of diseases that affect the elderly, reduce the quality of life. People who are with Alzheimer's move into some form of senility, where they no longer have any cognitive relationship to their past, to their family, and so on. This is a very frightening thing for me, and it's nothing I would want for myself. And this is going to raise some questions that I'm going to mention in a couple of minutes. But again, we each make our chances. I have friends who would say, I want those extra years and I don't care what they're like. And that's okay. That's a choice too.
What if they're wanting extra years and quality?
Well,
this... Could that be acquired?
If we can do that, that's great. And that also raises some questions that we're going to look at now. One of the things that happens in the aging population is what we call we become exposed to, is the issue of ageism. And ageism is an attitudinal response where you get a series of labels associated with being old. Somewhere, I've written a book called Geroethics. I've attached the format to it on your handout there, and you can get it over in the bookstore if you're desperate enough to find out what I'm talking about. But they have all kinds of labels. Old crock. What's an old crock? Old geezer. Little old lady, little old man, and all the things that go around it. 1 foot in the grave. All of these kind of things that demean aging. There was a time when an elder was looked at with a certain amount of respect because they had incorporated wisdom, they knew things. When I was introduced, it was mentioned that I had background in archaeology. One of the things that was fascinating when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found was that the Beduls, the group of Arab herdsmen that found the first scrolls, were sitting around the fire and talking about this. And one of the older men said, when I was a boy, I remember a cave, and he went into this, and they went and they found the cave where they found more scroll material. This kind of wisdom was stored in the head of the elder. Not anymore. You go to your little machine with the screen, and you punch a button, and it's all there. You can get in touch with libraries. You can bring up all sorts of things. Who needs the wisdom of the elder? I'm going to come back to that in a few moments. But nevertheless, it's something that goes along with ageism. And you go into the shop, and here you get in line. If you go into the grocery store, say at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, particularly where there's an old age community in the area, you'll find the person there with their little can of cat food, a little bit of cottage cheese, 1 tomato, 1 banana, and this sort of thing. And they stop and they chat with the cashier. And people behind her, The point being, this is transference, conversation, intimacy that is very rare. And you have to understand that this is a routine. They do this every day. The same people, and woman or man behind the counter knows about their grandchildren and asks questions and so on, and you're yawning. Or you're driving on the freeway and you see somebody, nice white hair, looking through the steering wheel, sometimes they're so small, and you're going, oh, God, they're going 55 miles an hour, and everybody else is doing 70 and trying to get past them. We have this attitude to these older people who are maybe a little more cautious, a little more careful, and so on. We put them down, and that reflects. You begin to withdraw. One of the things that happens with age is a restriction of your world. It's like getting a fatal disease. I had a student in my class who was in his 20s, and he contracted osteosarcoma in one of his legs, and it had very bad effects on his whole life because he had been a pilot. He could no longer fly a plane. He'd been a surfer. He could no longer surf. And his world was beginning to shrink. And this is what happens to older people. There was a time when I could stand back and jump from here and land on that table. I wouldn't dare try that now. I wouldn't dare, because I know where my physical limitations are. There were a time when I could probably take on John. I wouldn't dare now. He's young and he could outlast me if he could, if nothing else. But all of these are changes that come with aging. And the energy flow, the attitudinal responses, all of these things need to be recognized. And if they're not, we move into the field of ageism, which is a stereotyping of older people. And stereotyping means that you negate the validity of a group. If you can put them in a group, you could do anything with that group. And, you know, these are the people that are taking all the money from our government and so on. These are the people that are costing us more and more. And you start getting the negation of the validity of the life of the person. Along with this comes the other item, and I'm touching on these very briefly because of our time. This book is loaded with material on it, is elder abuse. Now, in the 1960s, we became aware of child abuse. And suddenly, as this came through the surface that had held it back, we began to discover it was going on all over the place. And we set up facilities and organizations and patterns in government response to protect the children. And this is still something that comes up in the lives of people in the discussions of divorce court settlements and so on. Then in the 70s we discovered spouse abuse, particularly the abuse of women. And we set up places of refuge where these women could flee and be protected from abusive spouses. Then in the 80s we discovered elder abuse. And right now we don't know the number of cases, but what has happened is the uncovering of terrible, terrible treatment of elders by members of their family. What happens is you become old, you become frail. Where do you go? You go to your family if you have one. And you hope that you're going to be treated with respect. After all, you gave your life to helping them. However, if you have been a brutal parent, you may get back what you gave them. When I was a laddie, I lived with my granny, and many a beating my granny did give me. Now that I'm a man, my granny lives with me, and I give to my granny what she gave to me. We have this revenge pattern, and this has come out over and over again. We have the indifferent pattern. Oh, people, what a nuisance. And so we find that here is an elderly couple who are living in the attic of somebody's home with a trap door that can be sealed so they can't get out. And the son or the grandson is expected to bring them food. You go up there, there are insects running around, cockroaches and so on. The place is dirty, it smells. Bits of half-eaten food from the local McDonald's or wherever the young man picks up the stuff are there. Or we find a woman who is being taken care of by her son, who has been refurbished the garage at the back of the place where he lives, and he has a lock on the door so she can't get out. She's got a fuzzy television in there. The toilet is plugged. The place smells to high heaven. And the reason we find out about this is one of the neighbors said, you know, we haven't seen her around. And they said, I think I saw her in the window. So somebody reports it. Social service department comes out and makes these discoveries. And you say, what on earth is happening in our society? And it's nothing that hasn't happened before, only we're becoming aware of it, and because of the crowding of conditions, everything's changing. We have now what we call the sandwich generation. These are people in their mid-40s and so on who have kids that are coming up going to college, and you know the cost of university education today. They're struggling to meet house payments, car payments, child payments, and all of a sudden their frail elders move in. So now they've got this level on the top. And the tensions that grow and the stories that have come out have been moving. The difficulty, particularly if the elders are terminally ill and you have to be with them day and night, and how you divide your time, who's going to look after them here and there and so on. So we're into a very frightening change that hasn't got this pattern of good health going with it. And the other thing is that along with this, there are many elders who neglect their health. They don't like going to a doctor. They don't want to be bothered. Or the family is using their Social Security money or their retirement money to help support the family. Or the son is on drugs and using that, and so they don't have anything to go to a doctor or a dentist and so on. They may have Medicare, but then they have to get to the place. And we have terrible statements coming out of research on this that shows how that kind of a pattern can be negative and destructive too. So we have a very difficult situation even with the family. Yes, sir?
You have ideas how an antidote for this abuse?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We are working on ideas, for instance, places of refuge for elders. Where do you go when you're unwanted? What happens? You see, abuse can be physical. Abuse can be physical. Abuse can be verbal, it can be psychological, it can be spiritual. All you have to do is, when you put the blanket up around a person's neck, is the way you do it. And you give an attitude, oh, I hate doing this. Or the way in which you can confuse a person. You tell them one thing one time, another thing the other. This is kind of a fun game to see how confused a person can be. And then you say, well, they're senile. So we have all these things going on at the same time. And along with this, we have the abusive factors from society at large. We have people who go door to door. You need to have on the roof of your house a number of your house painted so the helicopters going over can find your house. They go and they use a water-based paint. The first rainstorm, it's gone. But they've taken off these people who don't ask questions. So they're ripped off by merchants. They're also ripped off by religion. We have these people who promise miracle cures. I belong to an organization that helped expose one of these persons, and I'll give you his name. It was the Reverend Popoff. He had thousands of people in his audience. And he would go down and he would tell you, one after the other, your name, your address, what you're suffering from, what your doctor's name was, and so on. And we said, this is not memory. He hasn't got little cue cards. There's something else going on. We found that he had a receiver in his ear. And when you came in, his wife would go up to you and say, hello dear, how are you, and why are you limping, and you'd tell her about your this, and what's your doctor's name. She had a tape recorder. And so we took in a scanner into this audience, and we picked up the information. She's that woman sitting there with the blue sweater and the pearls. Yes, that's the one. And her husband's name is so-and-so. He is also suffering from such and such. And so this guy comes down, and you think he's getting his word from God. And so what we did, we put this on the Johnny Carson show. Good place. A lot of people watch Johnny Carson. And then we met on Sally Jesse Raphael with one of his representatives. And you have our agent, our person in charge of this was Randy the magician, the amazing Randy. And Randy said, you use your own wheelchairs. This man said, no, we don't. We never use our own wheelchairs. These people come in wheelchairs. And so Randy tunes it in, and you hear Mrs. Popoff saying, this is one of our own wheelies. And we got him off the air. We phoned the radio television station and said, how can you put this man on? He's a crook. He's dishonest. We have one session. He taped all this for himself, where he had his audience throw away their medications. We went up and gathered them afterwards. Dr. Jesus was going to heal them. There were nitroglycerin, there was insulin, all kinds of things for life-sustaining. And all I could think of is, oh, I hope these people went back to their doctor. This man was a crook. He was dishonest. Oh, the prayer letters that these people get, we went and picked up their garbage and we found all the letters thrown out. Who are these people that do this? Most of them are older people. They go in there, they're desperate for help, and they go in there for miracle healings. And we've investigated over and over again, and we've not found one miracle healing, not one. And even this young man down here on Trinity who throws the Holy Spirit at people has had to admit that he's not always above board with what he's doing. You see, at the turn of the century, people weren't rushed off to the hospital and put in the ICU, where children can't come in and visit them, and they die there at 2 o'clock in the morning. They died at home with the family around. 3 generations, sometimes 4 in a family. And when Grandma was there on her bed, feeble, or Grandpa, the kids could come in with flowers they picked, with the drawings from the school. They could have the dog in. It didn't matter. All of these kinds of things, we still have that in some places. Fortunately, there is a good deal of that still, particularly in some of the minorities, where the family has maintained this almost for basis of survival. This is the way it's done. And you have the breadwinner, the young father in the family, with maybe his sons also contributing. But Grandma's there, and also the grandchildren, and there's this unity. And there you feel wanted, you feel loved, you feel adored.
And when the kids come home from school, it's just, the door is open.
The door is open. But this is not where we are in our modern society. Sickness, you go to the hospital. If it's serious, you go into an intensive care unit. Intensive care unit, you don't want kids in it, and you sure don't want the dog or the parrot or whatever else. And if the person wants to have a drink in the afternoon, you can't do that in there. You have your pills and all the rest of it. So the whole way of life has changed. We've moved away from the family-centered caring for a lot of elders. Now, one of the patterns that has been developed is where you have families who do the same sort of thing for elders as they're doing for children. You have foster homes, and you have 3 or 4 elders living with a family who really like older people. And they sit around there and they're loved, and the kids come in and they have an artificial family, but at least it's somebody who's looking after them and is there 24 hours. This is what the husband and wife do, the same way as husband and wife set up family care for children. And this is an idea that has a potential for looking after frail elders, not healthy elders, but frail elders. We have also the nursing homes, which I'm sure you know, and I'm not going to go into this, vary in quality and quantity and so on, what they give and what they don't give. And what we advise here is that if somebody has an older parent that is going into a nursing home, you do something, you look carefully to see what on earth is there. You use your nostrils. What does it smell like? Stale urine and all this sort of thing. You go and look around and before you put your parents in there. And in the book on geroethics, I've tried to get a statement that nursing homes ought to have on the wall regarding their responsibility to the people who are in there, and also one with regard to the patient's responsibility in there. You get people in there who can be very disruptive, very nasty individuals. They've always been nasty, and they carry their nastiness where they go. You know these kind of people. Anyway, the third answer to this is the Hospice Program. And hospice is simply a way of dealing with terminally ill patients. These are patients who have less than 6 months to live. And what hospice is a way of dealing with these individuals that makes the last years or last months of their life as comfortable and as meaningful as possible. It began in England, our modern hospice did, and at St. Christopher's, and there you have a model of what a hospice can be. It's been picked up in the United States. Now, what we have is an organizational pattern where you have volunteers who work with the doctor, the clergy, the family, the neighbors, whatever. And here's a terminally ill patient, person there, part of the family. They will go to the home. They'll say to the family, look, you've had all the tension of caring for this person for the week. You have a day off. Get out. Go away. Do whatever you want. We know how to take care of them. We'll do this. And the hospice person moves into a relationship pattern. I mean, you're taking care of me. You care about me. And I feel cared about. You may read to me. You may write letters for me. You may bathe me. You may do whatever. And again, the medications are not to cure, because you haven't got anything that is curable. They're palliative. They're to control pain. And so if you have a man who has a parrot who swears, he can have a parrot there swearing all day if that makes him happy. If he always has his 4 o'clock drink, he can have his 4 o'clock drink. What does it matter? One of the palliative medications that they used in England contained opium and another painkiller drug. At any rate, they couldn't use it in the United States because the patient might become addicted. You know, they have 6 months to live, so they become addicted. You see, we get into all kinds of very ridiculous patterns. Oh, well, so hospice is one answer to the terminally ill where help can be given. We also have places where people suffering from various mental illnesses, senility, can be taken care of too. Finally, dealing with this frailty dimension of aging is the principle of euthanasia that was on the ballot here in California last November, and also in Washington, where it was both places it was defeated by 5%, but over 5 million people voted for it, and surveys have indicated that some 80% of the population is in favor of this. And this is medically assisted death. And we have, of course, the very dramatic patterns that have come to light with Dr. Kevorkian's, who's a pathologist who has been doing this on his own. I will only mention one case, and you can evaluate whether you like this or not on your own. This is Janet Adkins of Portland, who was in her 50s, and she contracted Alzheimer's. She had worked as a volunteer with Alzheimer patients. She was a real social activist. That is to say, she played tennis, she climbed mountains, she was involved with all kinds of organizations. And so when she contracted this disease, she had a good knowledge of its progression, of what happens. And she said, I don't want this. I don't want this kind of thing to happen to me. So she went to her pastor, she went to her counselor, she talked with her family, she talked with her friends, and when she felt the time was right, she went to Dr. Kevorkian, and he had a machine that allowed her to commit suicide. He was involved in what we call assisted suicide, which is against the law in most states and was not against the law in the state of Michigan. So he could get away with it there. And whether or not you agree with him or not, this was what she wanted, and the other dozen or so people that he has helped die also felt that they had the right to do something about their own death. Now, this is an issue that's going to come again and again before the public. No doctor should be compelled to do what he is against his wishes. No hospital should be compelled to allow this to take place on their premises if it's against their theology or their philosophy. And individuals should not be compelled to do any of these kinds of things. And the debates are going back and forth, on and on. I have now a 2-hour tape done on Frontier a week or two ago, where this dialogue went on and on and on with doctors and lawyers and philosophers and people arguing the pros and cons. But right now it is legal, the process is legal in Holland. If you went there, they would not help you, because you have to go to your family physician, and they're not going to become a death camp for people who just want to die. What they say is, we deal with families that we have been dealing with for a long time. And what happens here is very interesting. The older person, or the person who is going to die, they convince the doctor over and over again this is their wish, and there's a whole process that goes into this. But they bring the family together, where you can say your goodbyes and so on, and the person dies in the presence of the family. Back to what we were talking about at the beginning, only in a different kind of a setting. So we have a lot of things that are going on. I will say this, that right now euthanasia is being practiced under a different label here in the United States. I have talked with dozens of doctors, and I've said, have you ever given a mega dose of morphine, knowing that that's going to kill the person? And they said, yes, but we do it in the name of pain control. That is, it's all right to control the pain, it's not all right to kill the person. So we're now into a linguistic playing with terms. But these are very real issues, and they're going to be before you. Young people ought to know about this, older people ought to know about it. The most important document you can have, and I should have included in the file here, is the durable power of attorney for health care. Everyone should sign this, because you have the right to say, I want them to fight for my life right up to the end. I don't care how bad I am, I want to go right down there. Or you can say, when the time comes that I am enfeebled and I can't do this and can't do that and so on, I want my life to end. I don't want heroic means. I don't want to be kept alive by machines, which could be withdrawn and let me die, whatever a natural death might be. So these are issues right now. Yes, sir?
Sir, is that recognized? Power of attorney?
Yes. Durable power of attorney for health care, not for self-destruction. Only for the removal of heroic means of sustaining life. That is, if you're on a ventilator and you're on a heart machine and a whole lot of things, and they are simply keeping you alive, there's no quality of life left, you're in a comatose state, a permanent vegetative state, then all religions, or practically all religions, say yes, they can be removed. Most doctors will go along with this, and you'll be allowed to die, whatever a natural death, you can call it that way.
Your last statement.
The permanent
Removal of what did you say?
The durable power of attorney for health care enables you to state that if you are in a position where you can't communicate your will, you have somebody, suppose I'm your attorney, who will say, this is what the man wants, I have it in writing, remove the life support system because his quality of life is diminished to the point where he does not want to live. If you're competent to do this yourself, that's another thing. So we're into this is one of the aspects of aging. Now, let's turn the coin over. What can we do in terms of a positive approach to aging? And I want to leave you with some very powerful ideas. There's no question in my mind and the mind of people I'm associated with in this research that attitude is a tremendous contributor. We call it the power of positive thinking. It can come through a church, a synagogue, a mosque, whatever it is. It can come from a philosophy. I've dealt with this in the textbook here. I've quoted a very conservative Jewish scholar on the Jewish position. The Christian position echoes it. The Muslim position echoes it. The positive dimensions of life. The things that religion should do to make your life rich and powerful and so on. Not like that bad example I gave you where somebody's out there to rip you off. So that there's an attitudinal factor here that needs to be respected. How do we develop these kind of positive things? What are these attitudes? And I'm going to come back to that in a moment. The other thing, in addition to this, I have it down as action. That is, you do something to look after yourself. You are responsible. You can watch your diet. Right now, I am on as low a no cholesterol diet as I possibly can be. This is because I went into my doctor and he said, well, your cholesterol's high. And I said, high? And he said, yes, it's 2 points higher than it was last year. And last year was 294. And he said, and it's now 296. And I said, I've had my heart examination, all the things they do, the scans and all the rest of it. Nothing's blocked. And he said, well, we're going to work on it. So he gave me some pills. I came back. No, I was 294. And I came back after taking his pills, and I was now at 296. So he said, something isn't working. You're sneaking. And so this right now, you go up to the office. I ate a cookie this morning that I shouldn't have, but mea culpa, mea culpa. But apart from that, I'm trying to eat things that have no cholesterol, vegetables and all the rest of it to bring it down. That is, I can do something about it. I can take action. I can say no. I didn't this morning, but one cookie.
That was good cholesterol.
Yes, I said yes to cholesterol. But
all fruits and vegetables.
All fruits and vegetables are safe. That's true. And so I'm dining heavily on that kind of stuff. Chicken, fish, and no skin, all the rest of it. The other thing is exercise. There is no question that diet and exercise, and if you go over and talk to Dr. Schneider, who is the director of our program at Andros, he will discard all those things I gave you at the beginning, the pills, the potions, the vitamins, and all the rest, and say diet and exercise, diet and exercise. And if I showed you the film, you would see that the people, Sandy and Derek, with all their lines of pills, who are 2 years younger than Dr. Schneider, look older than he does, which I think is hilarious. So there is action you can take. When I was a kid in Canada, we used to talk about the people who pioneered and made the wrong trail. We always used to draw diagrams like this. You come to a fork in the road and you take this trail, you choose this one over that one, and you find it's not going anywhere. Well, you can't go across like this because there's a chasm in the middle and a mountain range and a whole lot of things, and you can't go back and start over again. So the only thing you can do is either kind of circumnavigate around, or you can fight your way across and start again. But the important thing is to make the right choices at the beginning. And as one who has made so many wrong choices, I can tell you that it's a good idea. All right, here's the first part. First point. Recognize that old age is not a stage separated from the rest of life. This is very important. Life is a continuum. It's a flow. I like to think of it as a stream where as it goes, you get little things that feed into it, enrich it with vitamins from this side and input from that side, a little mud from here, and so on, until it reaches its full flow. And so if you draw that kind of a image for yourself, that the stream of life, and you're on this, and you can recognize the things that have contributed already to who you are and what you are, and that you're not separating this part of my life from that part. It's all part of the same. Perhaps we can look at life in a way that can be positive and helpful. So old age is not a stage separated from the rest of life. And if you have a full life in your early years, you have a lot better chance of having a full life in your later years. Second, recognize that you're not a victim of aging. We get this victim. You know, I'm an innocent bystander in the process of life. No, you're not. You're involved. And you can decide to the degree to which your life will be warm and nourishing and life-enhancing, or the degree to which it will be toxic, cold, and life-denying. Do you know the kind of people who come into wherever they are and something happens? It's like you have a nice clear glass of water, you drop a drop of ink in it, and it goes right through everything. That kind of a toxic person, I know a number of them. They're the kinds you avoid, or you engage in meaningless conversations with them because you know there's going to be an argument immediately you say something. These people deny the validity of life. They have to have prove that everything has to be taken care of before you can even make one step forward, and so on. Look for those who will nourish you. Look in yourself for the nourishing attitudes. The third thing is focus on your potentials and your talents rather than your losses, your weaknesses, and your problems. Do you know the person you meet? It goes through, well, this has happened to me, and then this happened, and then that happened, and that happened way back 20 years ago, and I haven't forgiven him for that, and boring. Focus on your potentials. This is what I'm about. This is where I'm going. And that means that you lie in bed in the morning as you open your eyes and you think, oh boy, I've got this to do and this to do. Life becomes active. The fourth thing is, if you've blown it along the way, don't brood on it. Learn from mistakes. Move on. I know people who are immersed in things that were in the past. I know brothers who haven't spoken to each other for 15, 20 years. Why? Well, he married that woman and I don't like her. Oh, come on. You guys played together? Yeah, but that's different. So, life is a great teacher if you look at it that way. Life itself is the teacher. And you take advantage of all the potentials that it provides. You learn from the past. That involves you in the present and contributes to your future. How's that? That's a good phrase. The fifth thing, we're loaded with role models. Choose role models, particularly you younger people, that you can look to and admire. Select people who are examples of successful aging, successful living, who are involved. Explore biographies, some wonderful ones out. Autobiographies for the insights where the person begins to reflect on what's it all about. Episodes, and I'm going to come back to this in a few moments. Events that give life quality, that change pictures, that give dimensions. Sixth, look about you and see what kind of persons others are. And that's very important. And I go back to my nourishing and my toxic individuals. Emulate the former, the nourishing ones. Avoid the latter. That's simple. 7, don't lay back and engage in positive thinking only. This is the action. Take steps to change. One of the things, I did some work in therapy with elders for a while. One of the things that I learned was, yes, you can think positively and do a lot of things in terms of your life. But sometimes a good walk around the block will be as enhancing and as change-producing as anything that the mind will do. That is, you let the body lead the mind. This is something Telly Hall has been involved in for years. The body leads the mind as well as the mind leads the body. You're a totality. And once you get this idea of doing something, I'll give you an example, and I didn't do it. I was out over the weekend with a family that I don't particularly like. I had to because they're related in a way. And I ended up so tight inside, I was just like this. That night my son phoned me from Dallas, and I told him, he said, how are you? And I said, oh, geez, and I went through this whole thing. And he said, Dad, what I do, I go out for a walk. And I thought, hey, mind, body leads the mind. He said, yeah, I go out for a walk. And I said, then they'd have wondered where I'm going. He said, well, just tell them you need a little exercise. And I thought, yeah, good. Next time I walk. But these are the kinds of things, you see, you can learn from your sons as well as your sons learning from you. All right. The 8th point, involve yourself in personal health care. Maintain some sort of a diet, some sort of exercise pattern, and avoid stress. This is kind of hard. I mean, particularly at this time of the year with income tax due and all the rest of it. But have fun. Look at the last item I gave you on the last thing on your little handout. Let's look at that for a moment. This to me is a tremendous statement. If I had my life to live over again, you didn't get one? Well, here's a copy. Here's an extra copy of this, and I'll give you the whole thing at the end. No, give it. Oh, you don't have one of them? Yes. You didn't. It's on the last page. Oh, they avoided it? Well, let's pass these. Would you take care of this?
You had 15.
Yeah, that's right. I know. Yeah.
25 on the other.
Yeah.
15,
Okay.
25.
Yeah. Okay. Make sure everybody's got one. I'm going to read this to you, so you'll get it in my golden tones anyway. All right. I got this off a refrigerator in a house where I was visiting, and I looked at it and I thought, wow, what a statement. My goodness, they really did short you, didn't they? Well, we got enough. If I had to live my life over again, I'd dare to make more mistakes next time. I'd relax, I'd limber up, I'd be sillier than I have been this trip. In my case, that's going pretty far because I've been pretty silly. I would take fewer things seriously. I'd take more chances. I'd take more trips. I'd climb more mountains, swim more rivers. I'd eat more ice cream and less beans. That's not the Pritikin diet. I would perhaps have more actual troubles, but I'd have fewer imaginary ones. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? You see, I'm one of those people who live seriously, insanely, hour after hour, day after day. Oh, I've had my moments, and if I had to do it over again, I'd have more of them. In fact, I try to have nothing else. I like that too. Just moments, one after another, instead of living so many years ahead of each day. I've been one of those persons who never goes anywhere without a thermometer, a hot water bottle, a raincoat, and a parachute. I love this. If I had to do it over again, I would travel lighter than I have. If I had to live my life over, I would start barefoot earlier in the spring, stay that way later in the fall, I'd go to more dances, I would ride more merry-go-rounds, and I would pick more daisies. Isn't that great? Oh, wow. So this is the involvement in life itself. That's our point 8. Number 9 is continue to make new friends. We get people who get locked into the same group of friends. We had a group here called a Retired Faculty Association before the one we had here that, it was the Over 65 Club it was called. We had a vice president who's still alive who came to one of these meetings, and he came out and he said to me, I'm not coming back to these meetings anymore. They start off with all the people who are sick and are dying and are dead. I go in feeling great and I come out feeling terrible. Make new friends among some of the younger people so that your life and your involvement goes on and on. New acquaintances, new contacts, new experiences. Number 10, be involved mentally no matter what your age. And right now you are involved, some of you, in a course, high school courses, college courses, universities, churches, senior residences. These are educational adventures. There are all kinds of things to be learned. And if you do live to be 100,000 years, think of all the things you're going to know by the time you get to be 100,001. The 11th point is continue to work after retirement, if that interests you. We are raised on the work ethic. We get the idea if you're not earning money and you're not doing something, what are you doing with yourself? Sitting in a hammock all day? What do you do? Watching those stupid TV programs? How many of this can you digest? And I could give you example after example of people who've practically gone nuts on this. And I've also could give you example of people who didn't have alternatives when they retired, who simply shrank in terms of their life and so on, and I think shortened their whole existence. So if you want to work and be actively engaged and earn a few bucks, that's fine. There are many employers who like elders because, sorry you younger people, they are more reliable. They turn up on time and so on. They don't have the night before hangovers and all this kind of thing. All right. If you don't want to work, and this is point 12, get involved in volunteer services. My gosh, there are people who are aching for help. Organizations that need your input and your services. Now, I will admit that I know a woman who was a very prominent lawyer, got to be a judge, retired, went out to volunteer her services, and they had her filling envelopes. I mean, not really utilizing what she had to give. But there are things that we can all do. Number 13, avoid becoming a long-winded talker. Many elders do not know how to listen. They got to talk and talk and talk. The language that I picked up from some of my young people, and it isn't very nice, is verbal diarrhea. It just runs on and on and on. The 14th point is discover the joy of giving. More blessed to give than to receive. There's fun in it too. And I find that people who are giving tend to whine less about their terrible situation. They're more concerned about the terrible situation they're helping to alleviate. And the 15th is move out into life. Get away from the soaps. I know people who sit there and know every doggone deal. Even the newspapers tell you what's coming up in these silly programs. And it goes on and on. And I don't know how much television addiction begins in childhood and continues on into the adult life and into maturity, but there are all kinds of things. Walk down a different street. Go to a park and wander around there. Do something different. Get out, but don't sit on your comfortable chair and or butt and watch soaps. 16. Place greater emphasis on the little things in life that bring pleasure, and far less on what society tells you is important. We expend tremendous effort in trying to live up to what other people tell us we should be doing. And these can be toxic experiences. Use your energy for the things, little things that bring pleasure. 17, and this is one of the most important of all, and it goes back to this reading here. Learn to live in moments. Sacred moments, not years. I don't know what I was doing in 67 and 68. Who the heck cares? But moments that come out of these, and I'll talk to this in a moment. You build a chain of pearls like this lady has around her neck. Each one a sacred moment. Each one a moment that has meaning, that tells you something about yourself and about your life and what it's all about. 18, learn to love life. There's awesome wonder in nature. We had a chaplain here, Chaplain Newman. No, what was his name? Neumann? No, at any rate, when you go to graduation ceremonies, you have to listen to boring prayers and all the rest of it, telling God what we're doing and so on. This chaplain began like this. He started off, "Oh God, once again, the magnolias are in blossom." And I looked around and I thought, yeah, that's right. And every time I look at the magnolias, I think of his opening. He appreciated nature. He had to tell God that they were in blossom, and I thought that was nice too. But the point was, you look around and you see things. We had a vice president who we met with this morning who at one time, after the Olympics were held here, contacted a person who was so impressed with the flowers that had been adorning the campus during the Olympics that the man gave him money. And this campus is alive with growth because of this. This is a beautiful campus. And when you go across those little bridges, don't look underneath, because there are trolls underneath there. And there are all kinds of wonderful things that your imagination can pick up. learn to appreciate what there is in nature and life itself, the farmlands, from sea to shining sea. Then 19, and this goes back a bit to the moments, discover the integrating experiences that change life, that give you direction, that shape the course of subsequent events. Abraham Maslow, the psychologist, calls these peak experiences. Let me give you a couple. I'm going to stop with this. A number of years ago, I was in Egypt, and I was finishing my time there, my research there. I was in a taxi going to the airport, and chatting with the taxi driver, very intelligent, very acutely intelligent man. Wonderful conversation. And all of a sudden, he was talking, he stopped just like that. And I waited a moment. He said, "Please forgive me." He said, "We just passed the cemetery, and my father's body is in there." And I said a little prayer. And because I'm interested in the field of death and dying as part of my research, I said, "Tell me about your father's death." He said, "It happened when I was away. I was in Lebanon on some family business." He said, "I'm the oldest in the family. Here in Egypt, we bury the same day people die. And they don't bury underground, they bury in a crypt like this, families all together." And he said, "I felt I had not fulfilled my responsibility as a son to my father. So I went around to all the relatives, and I said, the next time somebody dies, I want to be permitted to go in and pay my last respects to my father." No one died for 3 months. Now, you know what happens to the body. So he said, I went in there and I said, "What happened?" Like this. And he said, "I saw God." And that's kind of a statement. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I saw things that changed my life." "What do you mean?" He said, "Right now, I divide my income into 4 parts. He had helped his brothers go to medical school and so on. He said, "One part I set aside for a business. I'm going to have a fleet of taxis here. One part I give to my mother so that she can become a Haji and make the trip to Mecca. One part I give to my wife for the family needs. And one part we celebrate as a family. We use for enjoyment. Because what my father is, I will become." That's what he meant. What has happened to my father is what will happen to me. That one moment changed his whole perspective, his whole direction in life. As an archaeologist, as an excavator, you don't have to open many tombs or dig through many occupation levels before you start reflecting on the rather swift passage of life. You're back 18, 20, 30 centuries, and you become aware of the brevity of life. And this was brought home to me very dramatically. This is my record from that time. It was 5 a.m. on a beautiful morning in August. The gray sky was beginning to turn blue, and the rising sun fringed the scattered clouds with gold and various hues of pink. I was in a very romantic mood.
Where was this?
This was in El Khalil, in Hebron, which is now in Israel. It was at that time in Jordan. A few crickets chirped in the old olive trees, and the awakening birds began their morning song. Suddenly, the serenity of those moments was pierced by a woman's keening wail that prickled the hairs on my neck. Then another woman's voice joined, deeper in pitch, but anguished and sob-filled. And it joined the first voice, and the mingled cries seemed to cling to the ancient stone walls near which we were digging. "What was that?" I asked. My teenage Arab helper, Damon, solemnly replied, "She lost her man." During the night, the young father had died. The first voice belonged to his wife. The second was his mother's. Throughout the early morning, we heard them crying. Later, we watched as they carried the body. The body was borne on a simple pallet to the mosque for prayers before internment in the family crypt. Now, we had just excavated the bones of a little child who had died beneath a massive rock fall, huge rock, as bigger than this table, that had come off the ancient wall that went during an earthquake 100 years earlier than in the 19th century. I better read this. Lower on the slope, some of our students were working in a cave dwelling whose occupants had perished when part of the roof had collapsed about 3,000 before the Common Era. or BC if you prefer. A few hundred years away was a Byzantine cemetery, where members of the Christian community had buried their dead during the 6th century of the Common Era, or AD, where one of our young students was supervising the excavation of several skeletons. Under such circumstances, I wrote, how could one fail to ponder the issues of life and death? The women's cries became the symbols of the wailing of mothers and wives and fathers and brothers and sisters and sons and daughters at the death of loved ones, everywhere throughout human history. Some had died accidentally, some through pestilence and disease, but how many through man's callous treatment of man, through war, tyranny, and hatred. Here are the bones, I wrote, of the past generations. Here are the household items used by families who occupied the houses whose foundations we have been clearing. Here are the little treasures of bronze and glass and clay that were dear to them and which beautified and enhanced their lives. Testimonials to man's or women's creative genius. But how quickly life passes, and how unimportant are the things of life, and how important are the moments that give meaning to individual existence. Here we go back to this chain of pearls again. And my question that I wrote at that time was, how then shall I live in the light of the past? What does this moment convey to me? Two phrases had burned themselves into my consciousness. One from a bookplate in a small volume that I purchased many years ago from a rabbi's library. The other from a delightful French film titled The Shameless Old Lady. The bookplate depicted a strong, angelic figure standing on the top of the world with the winds of space blowing against his garments. Above his head, he held a banner that was written in kind of Hebraic English, better to burn out than to rust out. And the last line of the film, The Shameless Old Lady, was, she ate of the bread of life and she savored it to the last crumb. Then I wrote, as an archaeologist and historian, keenly aware of how brief my few years are in the registry of thousands of years of human development, these sentences are slogans, together with the experiences of this excavation at Hebron, prompt me to seek to press out of each moment all that I can of love and joy and peace and pleasure, to the extent that I might experience to the full the great and wonderful gift of life. The zest for love, for life, relates to what I have been doing most, working with people in ideas and artifacts at that time that enable us to appreciate the marvelous history of humankind, to the teaching and encounter with students, to research and probing of the past for our understanding of the future. Now that was written some 25 years ago when I was involved in this. As I concluded the book, I tried to say something about who we are as older people, and these are my closing words. We are not a group of helpless, doddering old fogies. We are alive, and by the way, you have this in your little reprint of the book cover. We are alive and we can be socially and ethically involved, demanding our rights and our recognition as significant humans who seek to bring about changes that will transform this troubled world into a place that is just a little bit closer to the highest dreams and ideals envisioned by sensitive and caring humans. It matters now that we are here. It can matter to the future that we have been here. This is what longevity, this is what length of life, this is what the life process is all about for me. Any questions? Thank you.